Hello, welcome back to Climate Dialogue, and I'm your host, Dorcas. This is our second episode, and today we are diving into the fascinating history of climate science. In our last episode, we introduced you to the basic components of and key terms of climate science and how we are going to explore how climate science has evolved over the years. Join me to welcome Michael, and he will be taking us through the history of climate science.
Great to be back to dig up facts with Dorcas.
Okay, so it's great to have you, and let's just go
All right.
straight into what we have today. So now we're going to be looking at the early discoveries. Okay, climate science has been developing for quite some time, but we want to know, where did it all begin? We didn't just meet climate
Yeah,
science; it
yeah,
actually began somewhere. So where did climate science
yeah.
begin?
So thank you very much. That's a great question, Dorcas. So the foundations of climate science have gone all the way to the 19th century when scientist John Tyndall conducted experiments that demonstrated certain gases like carbon dioxide and water that were trapped in the atmosphere. So this was like the first step to understanding what climate change and climate science was at the moment.
Okay, so that's amazing. So we know that yes, it's scientists that conducted the discovery, and also we know that it's scientists that first discovered the use of how climate science works.
Yeah.
So now, how did scientists move from this discovery of climate science and the greenhouse effect and all to understanding that human activities are actually the ones affecting climate?
Okay. So now the big leap came in the 1800s. That's thanks to Swedish scientist Svante Arrhenius. He calculated that increasing amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere led to significant rise in Earth's temperature, right? So this became groundbreaking as other scientists jumped on it and started doing their own experiments. And we got to discover that burning things like coal and firewood will cause certain changes to the climate. Though he didn't give the full scope of what we are seeing today, but he set the stage for modern climate change.
Okay, so that's okay. That's nice. Let's fast forward now to the 20th century. How did our understanding of climate change develop in the modern era?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So, in the 1950s and 1960s, climate science really took off, and one of the key milestones was the Killing curve, named after Charles David Killing, who began measuring carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere at a site in Hawaii. So his data provided the first clear evidence that CO2 levels were rising year after year.
So that's the famous graph that shows the steady rise of carbon dioxide, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's keep that whole part.
Yeah.
Okay, so now this and with this killing curve, this has led us to the formation of the IPCC, right?
Yeah.
Which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So, can you tell us a little bit about the IPCC?
All right, that's right. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that's the IPCC, was established in 1988 by the United Nations to provide comprehensive assessments of the science related to climate change. So their response has been crucial, and it's more like a guiding principle for the climate change advocacies and interventions we have today.
Okay, so now we know that there's a body that regulates and guide us on climate policies globally.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should put that in mind that we have the IPCC that guides us globally on climate policies. Okay, so now it's incredible to think that after how far we have come and how far we have gone, climate science has actually evolved, right?
Yeah.
So we know that there's an urgency of the problem of climate change. Now, how has the focus shifted from understanding climate change to actually taking action? So most people just understand that yes, there's climate change, but are we really doing what we need to do to avert climate change?
All right. Thank you very much for this particular statement and question. So, well, in the scientific community, it is confirmed that climate change is real and it is human driven, of course. So, the conversations around climate change shifted to human based solutions, human driven solutions, um, recently, right? So international agreements like the Kyoto Protocol of 1997 and the Paris Agreement of 2015 were direct responses that show human-driven approaches towards climate solving climate problems.
Okay.
Yeah. So the goal is not just understanding climate or how climate works, but finding ways to mitigate its impact and adapt to the changes that we can't avoid.
Okay, so now it is not only the government that has a responsibility, it's not only stakeholders. So individuals, do we also have a part to play in this?
Yes, absolutely. So climate change is a global issue, and individuals are also actors in the because of the global stuff on it,
Yeah.
right? So it's not an individual issue; it's an issue that all humans can join hands together to actually solve. Like what? Reducing your carbon footprint, creating advocacies around policies that will shift, that will look more at climate change and supporting sustainable practices. And one of the practices is waste management, reuse of plastics, and reduced usage of plastics. And these are key to sustainable futures for us and for our kids unborn.
Okay, so that's very, very lovely. Thank you, Michael, for walking us through the evolution of climate science. It is clear that we have actually come a long way from those early discoveries, but we know that there's still much work to be done.
Climate science has given us the tools to understand the problem. Now it's up to us to find solutions and solve the problem for
Okay.
long term. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Climate Dialogue. We hope this exploration of climate science issue has given you a deeper appreciation of how we've arrived at today's understanding of climate change. In our next episode, we'll discuss the impacts of climate change and how they are affecting communities around the world. Stay tuned and remember, understanding climate science is the first step towards making a difference.